Okay.
This meeting is being recorded.
Here we go. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Lewandowski. I'm with the New Jersey State Library. Welcome to our January 10th, 2023 LibsWork meeting. It is great to see you all and have another year of LibsWork. Thank you to Emily Goodman, who is going to be sharing information about digital literacy and a program that was funded through ARPA, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we are excited to hear about that. Digital literacy is a very popular topic in this group. So I'm sure you're going to have lots of questions and comments and a lot of interesting conversation to come out of this. So we'll get started with introductions. If you either don't have access to a microphone or you're battling laryngitis, you could go ahead and type into the chat. But I'll start and call on somebody, and then if you don't mind calling on another person, and we'll try to go through introductions as quickly as we can. You can share your name, the library you're with, and if there's either anything interesting or that you're proud of from 2022 or something that you're looking forward to in 2023 around workforce development, business services, digital literacy, or anything else. I think that would be a good icebreaker. So like I said, I'm Andrea. I'm with the New Jersey State Library. I'm the library consultant for small business development and technology. And I am looking forward to year 2 of our NJSL Plus Partners project, which is, it is doing digital literacy support, but we are hoping to build a community of practice around and training for the libraries that are offering digital literacy, and hopefully getting in a good position so that when additional funds might be released in the future, there is some infrastructure in place. So I'm excited to see where that goes. And I am going to call on Emily.
Oh boy, I don't know what I'm excited for yet. So I'm Emily Goodman. I'm the Adult Services Coordinator at the Office of Library and Information Services in Rhode Island. So workforce development is just one of the things that is encompassed in my role. We have struggled to break into that in Rhode Island because there's already some groups doing that work that we don't want to, repeat what they're doing, but they're hard to work with. So I think for me, I'm excited. This is year 2 for me in this role. So I'm going to be looking forward to sort of understanding the range that's happening in Rhode Island, especially as sort of the pandemic is winding down, maybe in these later years. So that's it for me, and I will pass it to Jennifer.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Demas. I'm with the Fort Worth Public Library. I'm actually filling in for somebody today who's in another meeting. So I think the thing I'm excited for about digital literacy is we rolled out using North Star last year, and it's been going really well. And we're kind of excited to see how far we can expand that. I forgot to call on somebody. I'll call on Nan.
Excuse me, and sorry about my earlier interruptions. I hit the mute button, but it just, didn't take. Anywho, I'm Nan Carmack. I'm the Director of Library Development and Networking at the Library of Virginia, our state library here in Virginia. And I am excited that I have bullied, elbowed, pushed my way to the table in a couple of state entities, the Small Business Development Center administrators, as well as the Virginia Main Street communities, so that we're able to share with them what libraries do in relation to developing small businesses and helping them have the resources they need to be successful, both from a soft skills perspective as well as a hard skills perspective. So those were 2 wins for us, and just got invited for the first time to our statewide BEAD grant planning committee. So again, just, kind of pushing my way into places where we should be, but they hadn't thought of library inclusion yet. So thanks so much for letting me be here. We are hoping to have a consultant to deal specifically with digital literacy and workforce development but we just are still struggling to get the funding. So you're stuck with me periodically. And I will call on Arlene.
Hi, everyone. I'm Arlene Weibel. I'm at the State Library of Oregon, and I have been involved with the workforce development end of consulting with libraries across our state, and am kind of shifting focus to have kind of the broader umbrella of digital inclusion. And so what I'm really excited about is all of this potential funding coming down for helping libraries and other partners work on the digital literacy aspect of digital inclusion. I think it's the underrepresented and under funded aspect of digital inclusion. And I'm so happy that all of the forces at work at the national level who lobbied to have digital skills building as part of the federal funding actually actually be part of what these grants are going to be about. So so like others, I'm just trying to put my nose in wherever these issues are being talked about and get libraries at the table in those discussions. So I will call on Mark next.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mark Yoakum. I am with the South Central Library System here in South Central Wisconsin. And my role there is Workforce Development Consultant. And what I am looking forward to are explorations in new ways for libraries to get involved. To get involved in workforce development in however they can, either through digital literacy or through social services. I think those are both ways, seems to be ways that we all get together. And I will hand it on over to another Wisconsinite, Chris.
Greetings, y'all. Thanks, Mark. My name is Chris Baker. I am the public library consultant with the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, which is our state library agency in Wisconsin. And yeah, I'm really excited for 2023. We already have a pretty strong scaffolding in place when it comes to partnering libraries with library, or I should say system consultants, system specialists. We have 16 library systems in the state of Wisconsin that they themselves are working with their member libraries to develop some really foundational and sustainable collaborations with local wraparound service agencies and workforce development agencies. And so we have a monthly work group that meets with system consultants. And on top of that, we are really looking forward to being able to effectuate some in-person workshops throughout 5 or so pressure points in the state of Wisconsin based on sparsity formulae. So we'll get an idea of where unemployment is kind of really a struggle and where some wraparound services are especially needed. Put together these collaborations, hopefully in these 5 different places, and then use that as a template for other libraries throughout the state of Wisconsin. Mark is a rock star when it comes to workforce development. So if anybody has any questions, I honestly cannot recommend enough that you reach out to Mark. Thanks, y'all. I have to pass it. I forgot. Well, let's see. Has Joyce gone yet? Joyce, would you like to go?
Hi, I'm
Passing
Joyce.
it to you.
Thanks. I am the I just succeeded Elizabeth as the workforce development librarian for the Washington State Library. So I'm really looking forward to learning how to become a workforce development librarian, because for the past decade I've been in operations in the library, and it's just a very different way of learning and looking at your data. And I'm super excited because this year we are doing a statewide digital skills assessment, and we're asking whoever does it to really go deeper and get more meaningful community survey information and find new methods of doing that. And I'm just so excited to find out what those are going to be. And yeah, nice to meet everyone. I'm going to say Elizabeth. We're going Elizabeth.
Thanks, Joyce. I'm Elizabeth Yaukia. I'm the Workforce Development and Adult Basic Education Program Manager for the Seattle Public Library. I'm excited to almost be done with my first 8 months back in a public library system, which is really exciting. I think I was with the state cumulatively close to a decade and a half. The adult basic education piece is pretty new for me, so I'm excited to really get a handle around that, making some changes to our programming this year and going back to in-person programming. And I realized that I have never actually done public programming in libraries before. I don't know how that didn't occur to me until several months into the job, but we are in the process of finishing up a digital equity strategy plan for Seattle Public. Doing some internal asset mapping, supporting a community asset map that will be a resource for providers to make referrals, noting when resources are available in person or online, what kind of services different organizations offer, and whether they offer those in language, as well as some recommendations for things that our library system can do to increase our digital equity. Yeah, just lots of changes, making some changes to our job seeker program called Your Next Job, moving to a different scheduling platform, lots of little things going on. So I am super thrilled that there's a lot of digital equity stuff and ESL stuff going on in this group this year. So thank you, Andrea, for all the planning. And I will pass to poor Lisa. Are you going to put your stuff in the chat, Lisa? Lisa with laryngitis. Lisa Shaw from Maine. Is that terrible to do that to you?
Yeah, she already put in chat.
Okay, well then I will pass to Africa Hands.
She also put in chat. We'll throw it over to Erin.
Thanks.
Hi there, my name is Erin Lorandos. Actually, I'm originally from Wisconsin, so it's really funny that there are so many Wisconsin people on this call. I used to work for South Central in the Verona Public Library as well as the New Glarus Public Library. So hi, but now I'm out here in Arizona, and I've been out here for almost 10 years. But I've worked primarily in libraries and public and academic libraries out here, and just recently moved over to the Arizona State Library. And my position is the Digital Inclusion Library Consultant. And so this is a brand new role for me. However, it is not a new role for the state of Arizona. A lot of work has been done, but there's been a little bit of a gap in my position being filled. It took about 6 months for me to find it. I mean, I knew about it, but for me to move over to it. And so I am in week 4 of my job. So I'm still just trying to figure out where all of those tables are that we were invited to, and kind of get back up to speed with everything. And one thing that I'm really looking at, since I have spent a lot of time in public libraries, especially most recently in a smaller public library in the West Valley in Arizona, we could use, the relationship between the city and state workforce development folks here, I think, to leverage a lot of the things that are happening in the digital inclusion and digital equity space in a different way than we have been. My position oversees a set of digital navigators that use North Star. Hearing that term was fantastic. And so one of the things that I have a huge goal for in the first bit of my new job is to kind of kickstart the outreach side of it. And I think the workforce development teams in the cities that we serve will be a really great place to do that. So thank you for letting me speak a little bit. And let's see here. I have tried to keep track of who has gone and who hasn't. I think Bethany has not gone yet. Is that correct?
You are correct. I have not gone yet. I'm Bethany. I am workforce and business librarian from High Plains Library District in Northeast Colorado, Weld County. And I am, let's see, I'm excited about being part of this workforce type thing. I'm lacking words today. I just came off the floor. So we have been working with our local employment services office for about a year and a half. And just last quarter, we have done sort of a trade where their workshop facilitator comes to my library and teaches a job resources class in Spanish. And then I go to the employment services office and I teach 2 different computer basics class. So a really basic one of here's a mouse, here's a keyboard, and then another one on using the internet for job searching, which are 2 things that we help at the library the most with job seekers. So our library district is just now sort of getting into the game as far as being a partner in the community for workforce and business. I'm also working on becoming a SBDC consultant. So I'm excited about that. So yeah, that's about it. And I will pick Susan.
Hi, everybody. My name is Susan Vignolo. I'm in New Jersey. I am very new to this work. I graduated in May, and this is my first job. Our library has a grant from the PLA and AT&T for digital literacy to reach populations. So I've been teaching classes at our library, basic computer classes. This is my first LibsWork meeting. I'm just excited to learn, I guess is what I'm saying. So we've been teaching mostly seniors, and I'm interested in outreach to reach kind of job seeking populations. Oh, and oh my goodness, who hasn't gone? Has Stacy gone?
Hi, I am Stacy Mulligan. I'm from Office of Commonwealth Libraries in Pennsylvania. Things I'm excited about. We just started, or we are starting a new 5-year LSTA plan. So I'm excited to think about all the ways that workforce development, digital literacy can be built into that. We're trying to look at everything through an EBI lens. Specifically, I'm helping a colleague, a couple of you may know her name's Carrie Cleary, with some digital literacy work. She's been doing great work helping to create a map of resources for training in digital literacy. I'm also helping her create a LibGuide around that. And she has asked me to collect all great tips and stories from those doing digital literacy work in other states. So feel free to reach out to me and share the great work that you're doing so we can help populate our other state section. I'm also thinking about, I mentioned this before, but I really think it's time to do another workforce development digital literacy needs assessment or survey. So we're thinking about hiring a consultant for that, especially in advance of this new LSTA plan work. That's about it. Let's see, Stephanie.
Stephanie Warwick, and I'm at Queen Anne's County Library in Maryland. And I am new to the position, so I'm still learning about workforce development in our area. And have we talked to Karina yet?
I think Karina already put into chat. So how about we go with Hillary?
Hi, I'm Hillary Ritt. I'm with the Kentucky Department for Libraries and Archives. I'm a Workforce and Adult Services consultant, and I am excited about a statewide job fair that is really an opportunity for public libraries during National Library Week to offer career development or on-site job fairs during that week. They can do it all week. They can do it one day. And we have heard from public libraries in Kentucky and school libraries. So we're excited about that coming up in April, at the end of April during National Library Week. Sorry, I got Craig.
Hello, I'm Craig Story. I work at Herrick District Library in Holland, Michigan, and I'm a library assistant. One of the most common questions we get on the info desk is, do you guys offer computer classes? And so I'm trying to get a feel for starting some classes with my coworkers and utilizing the resources we have in our digital workshop called Groundworks, where they do resume building and kind of combine all that. I'm excited to bring those folks into the fold. And I will call on P. Townsend next.
That's me. I am part of a working group together, a consolidated working group. We've got this, I'm from Calvert County, Maryland, and we have 4 locations, and there's people picking all the locations that are zooming in on this just to get new ideas. So I'm along for all the ideas. We did use North Star, and that worked very well, but you know, there's more things to learn. So.
And last but not least, Megan.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Megan Janicki from the Public Policy and Advocacy Office at ALA. I am excited to be here today and hear Emily's presentation about digital literacy, because we are thinking about how to connect our broadband and digital equity portfolio to our entrepreneurship and small business portfolio. And one thing that's come up recently is the Department of Labor's request for information on digital literacy. We're looking for exemplars from the field. You might have seen an email from me yesterday mentioning that we're looking for examples from your libraries that we can include and lift up as kind of inspiration for that. So I'll put the link in the chat as well, but happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And this is like a perfect segue for a couple quick plugs. So the first one is our next meeting for LibsWork on February 14th, I want to say. I think it really is Valentine's Day. Yes, Valentine's Day. Spend it here with LibsWork, and Lara Clark from PLA will be our guest. Let me pull up her email. Sorry. But she will be talking about sort of an update on some things that are coming ahead related to digital literacy, information literacy, and workforce development for libraries. She'll be talking about some of the advocating job or work that she's been doing, and soliciting ideas and things that ALA should know about for the work that they're doing. So next month, come back to hear from Lara, and it should be a great conversation with a lot of updates. The other thing I think would be a good time to do a plug for, Arlene, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot about the North Star group, if you want to share when that group meets as well.
Sure. Yeah, I realized I should have mentioned that when I was doing my intro. So yeah, we do have a group of folks that meets once a month to talk about issues related to North Star digital literacy. And the next meeting for that is actually this coming Thursday. I'm sorry, at 1 o'clock Western time, Pacific time. So, and basically, I'll share some links in the chat about how to access the meeting, and also see a discussion forum that we have for North Star. It's a great place to just share ideas, and we also have North Star staff there, Teresa Sladek, who's a trainer for North Star, as well as Tom, who's kind of the overall manager there, and they're great. It's a great place to ask questions about things going on with North Star, but also just in the last couple of meetings, we've also had some great discussions about just digital literacy policy and planning as well. So if you aren't already on the mailing list for those meetings, just shoot me some email and I will go ahead and add you to the list. Thanks.
Thank you, Arlene. So now I'm going to turn it over to Emily for some information about what's been going on in Rhode Island. Everyone, please stay updated with chat on the side. I see a lot of links being shared, and you can post questions, keep the conversation going. So thank you so much, Emily, for reaching out and volunteering to talk to us, and we're excited to learn more. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrea, you can interrupt me with questions from the chat. I suspect I won't be able to see the chat while I'm presenting, but I don't mind being interrupted.
Sounds good. Thank you.
So let me share. Let's see. And present. All right, so you're all seeing this all right?
Yes.
Yes, great. Okay, perfect. So as I said, I'm Emily. I work for the Rhode Island Office of Library and Information Services. I started last October, which will be very relevant when you learn that this project started last October. Well, October 2021. I call it last October, but it was October 2021. This project sort of started, kicked off. It was one of the first things that I worked on. So I have a slight disclaimer for you that I didn't implement this program. My role here at the library, at the Office of Library Services, was to sort of oversee the grant management of this, work with the staff at Providence Public that was implementing this program. So I met with them weekly, and we had also bi-weekly and or monthly meetings with sort of our higher up staff, the chief of services here and the director at the library there, and just sort of having check-ins. So I'm sharing with you everything that they've submitted to us from their final report and all of the information that I've had in doing the work with them, but that I wasn't part of the day-to-day process. So if you have questions about the day-to-day process, I can try to answer them from the best of my knowledge, but I may have to refer out to the person who worked on this program, who I will also just say was sort of a contract position who works specifically on grants, implementing grants for the library. So she's now moved on to another grant, but we do have her access, her contact. So just keep that in mind while you're listening and asking questions. So this project sort of had multiple components. Oh, I should go back, sorry. So our office received about $2.3 million of ARPA money to disseminate from April 2021 through this past September 2022. This grant took up about 10% of those funds. So we granted them to the Providence Public Library to implement a program for extending the digital literacy programming that they do at their library already to other libraries throughout the state. So a lot of our libraries, we have 48 libraries and 71 buildings. So all of those are different, 48 library systems, I should say. So there's, they all operate independently, and within that there are 70 some branches. And many of them have somebody on staff, reference, or technology that does sort of tech help, but there's not very much happening in a very targeted way throughout the state for digital literacy. So the goal of this project was to have PPL who does that at their building, and they contract out to other libraries, mostly our urban libraries. So we basically paid for their contracting services to do this, to implement this statewide, and we worked with them to identify libraries to attend or to connect with, rather, and to make it really a targeted and concerted effort. So the components of this project may be a little bit familiar to you. So they hosted learning lounges, which were one-on-ones, digital literacy classes, and then they also did a fair amount of outreach. So I'm going to focus for this slide on the outreach piece. I know it comes third, but it's quite important. So as part of their outreach, they connected with people individually, and the start of their programming was still sort of in those early days of the pandemic, where libraries weren't quite opening for programming yet. By the end of the year, there were a number of libraries that were still a little nervous. It was like during the Omicron days. So they did a lot of online help for people. They did it either digitally or they did a lot over the phone. So they had like this very personal outreach that they did to a lot of the people who were signing up for interest that I think was really important for the success of the program. They had like individual touch points. They also had a multidisciplinary team of professionals throughout the library and throughout other outreach pieces that they targeted marketing on social media. They posted flyers in the communities, like physically, wherever they were going to have a program. If they, were in a different city, they would go post things physically. They disseminated things digitally, and they also utilized a lot of listservs that the library either had or was a part of to disseminate the information. And I think that was one of the keys to this program. So now we'll talk a little bit more about the things that they did. So the first component to this were those learning lounges. They were one-on-one, some scheduled, some drop-in sessions for helping people with digital literacy skills. And this is from, somebody comes in and they don't know how to use a computer at all, to having very specific things that they were looking for. And so this was very targeted one-on-one help. They did use North Star Digital Literacy. The Providence Public Library has a subscription to North Star. They're the only library that I know of in Rhode Island that has that subscription. So they did help some people go through that, but this was definitely just that one-on-one that a lot of public libraries sort of are offering, but in a very targeted way. This is a nice quote from one of the participants that says, they solve your questions and explain step by step. It's easier than taking a class where you get lost in the explanation. So this really worked for some of the people. Then they had, there's supposed to be a picture there, but then they had digital literacy classes. These were both in English and in Spanish that these were offered. They started with some that were bilingual, but those weren't really that popular. People who came that were more Spanish speaking sometimes were thrown off with the bilingual aspect. So they ended up switching to just English and just Spanish, but offering those classes as much as they could in the same location in each language. They hired specific people, mostly from the communities that they were serving, to lead these, and they were about super basic computer skills, from just navigating the internet, how to open a browser, what that means using Google, getting people set up with Gmail, and then they did some Microsoft Word and Excel classes in some locations by request of the people. And again, as people were signing up, they were specifically calling and talking to people about what their needs were and trying to place people where it made sense. So because we're a very small state, and you'll see that in another slide, it doesn't take much longer than an hour to an hour and a half to drive from one spot to the next in Rhode Island. So as long as there was transportation, they could sort of take somebody who might have signed up in Providence and say, oh, well, we have this class that might be better suited for you in Pawtucket. Would you be willing to go there? So another quote from one of our participants is, I feel more confident. I developed knowledge that I did not know before. In my opinion, these classes work for adults who do not have the knowledge to use computers. I am totally grateful. So one of my prime roles, I think I mentioned, was to connect the library team to other libraries in Rhode Island. So we identified some service areas that we were interested in working with, and along the way, either the team had somebody who, they hired from some town that they said they would be interested in staying local, and we would reach out to those libraries. And we also targeted some of our libraries to span the state. So you can see I sort of roughly outlined the state for you here. We're situated in this little arm of Massachusetts and Connecticut. And we really stayed throughout the state pretty well along our major routes. We definitely missed this sort of top corner of the state, which often I think it becomes neglected. It's very difficult to get there, but we did pretty well with one of our top communities of Woonsocket that needs a lot of workforce development work was included. So we're pretty excited about that. Let's see. So some of the libraries that we contacted either couldn't host because they didn't have space, they didn't have the capacity, their spaces. We have a lot of small libraries, so if there's just one room and it's already booked, it's hard to kick somebody out for this. And some of them that we tried, the facilitator that they had hired, that PBL had hired, couldn't make it to that location. So that was unfortunate. So we had 19 participating libraries and 3 additional partner sites. And that number could have been a little bit higher, but just for lack of space or capacity, or sometimes even signups, some of our locations just didn't quite grasp the community as much as we had hoped it would. So we ended up with these 19 libraries, and then the partner sites were places in the community. So you can see sort of the top here, Rhode Island College Workforce Development Center is in one of our small urban cities, Central Falls. So the library there is very small. They had some security procedures to getting in that really stunted the success of the program. People had difficulty getting to the library and then like figuring out how to get inside. So we moved that program just like down the street and took advantage of this brand new facility that was specifically meant for getting people workforce development opportunities. They have like a computer lab, so we used that for the classes. And it was a really great partnership. We had another library in the city of Providence that in the middle of the summer, the air conditioning in the community room where they were doing the classes just completely broke. So instead of just canceling all of those classes, again, they moved down the street to an American Job Center and used that facility instead. So we really leveraged a lot of those existing partnerships and local community members and groups to make sure that the people in the areas were being served. All right, so what people experienced, not just, the very basics of how to get on the internet, what is a computer, how to use a mouse. They also got specific help with digital health resources. So those are things like local COVID screenings and testing sites, going to the pharmacies, getting like vaccine appointments with our local CVSs, and accessing online health portals through the hospitals and doctors' offices. People who really struggle with those, and they were able to get help with in these like learning lounges. They also helped with public assistance and economic relief. So people who wanted to like apply for SNAP or medical coverage or rent relief programs came and received that help. In education and employment resources, we have a statewide database that's free for anybody that's accessing it within Rhode Island. So that's called Ask RI, and that includes things like Mango languages. So those were really leveraged and offered as opportunities for people. And a lot of the feedback that we got were people being like, I didn't know that existed, and now they do. They also helped people with this new initiative that they call Employ RI. So during the pandemic, the workforce development people within the state of Rhode Island developed this new sort of database, I guess, for companies to like host usually like manufacturing type jobs. And so it's sort of this one-stop shop for helping people kind of get back to work. So they did some Employer Rhode Island job searches, and they also helped people connect with classroom portals. So people who have students in the state and they're, all of the online resources, connect with your teachers, see your kids' report card, those kinds of things are done with online portals. And there's a number of people that just don't know how to access that, right? That's like totally foreign to them, not part of how it was when they went to school. So they got help with that too. They also did community programs and services like connecting people to behavioral health organizations and community health workers. And finally, one of the most popular ones, especially with some of our seniors, was a well-being and social interaction. So we helped people, learn how to use Zoom so they could participate in library programming, learn how to use Facebook Messenger so that they can keep in contact with their friends and family who are far away. And they also learned WhatsApp. So those are just some examples of the types of things that people were doing, mostly in the learning lounges, but some of this also came out of those digital literacy classes as well that were tailored. One class was held specifically in a senior center, so they focused a lot on that Facebook Messenger and like social interaction pieces. So the results, right? This is what we really care about. Altogether, they served over 1,900 direct service hours. There were 7 I think facilitators total, or at least 7 full-time and maybe a few more part-time. And from the beginning to the end, with those learning lounges and the classes, they served over 1,900 hours. They reached over 2,800 participants, and this includes repeat people. I think in total, unique individuals, there was just under 1,000. And then some people both went to learning lounges and classes. Some people, did repeat classes. We counted those as multiple participants. Some people ended up dropping out of classes because they got jobs. And we learned a lot of that in that outreach piece of connecting with people. If they didn't show up for an appointment or for a class, they were reached out to just to make sure, is it a transportation issue? What can we do to help you succeed? And we found out a lot of people ended up getting jobs, which is pretty exciting. And 4 languages were spoken. So obviously English, Spanish, and then those one-on-ones, there were some of the facilitators who spoke Portuguese and Creole Portuguese, which are pretty popular in our urban areas. So people were really taught where they were at, which was really handy. A lot of the feedback also that came in was really people being excited that there were services in their own language, because going to a library and having people only speak English to teach you something when your English is poor is really difficult and doesn't bring people back. 69% of the people who attended digital literacy classes alone, that was the only one that was measured, demonstrated an increase in their digital literacy skills. From the beginning to the end, they definitely demonstrated that they'd learned something within those classes, which I think is pretty impressive. 38% of the people who participated in one of the programs participated in the other. So if they went to a learning lounge and then they did a class, or some people did classes and then learned about the learning lounges and were super excited to be able to go and practice what they had been learning or to ask deeper questions. And then over 350 North Star certifications and badges were earned across all of the participants. So this was mostly, again, in those learning lounges, people who needed some skills were steered towards North Star, and a lot of those people could do it online from home, which was really great. So again, even though PPL is the only library in the state that offers that programming, we were able to get people across the state hooked into that. And now, that they know about it, they can direct people to either go to that library or to look online to participate, which is exciting. And we had about a quarter of our libraries throughout the state that were connected in and offering programming, which I think is a huge win. As coming from our office, it's not very often that we have things that span all of our libraries. So that was huge for me. Our feedback's pretty positive. 95% of the respondents said that they learned something by participating, and that 80% are more likely to use other library services and resources as a result of participating in this programming, and we would like to see that. These are some of our success stories. We will revisit Linda, but Linda was prepping for her GED, and at least here in Rhode Island, that has to be done on a specific computer, and she didn't have any skills. So you see her practicing there on a keyboard. She went out and bought her own mouse and keyboard to practice at home, even though she doesn't have a computer. So in between classes and sessions with her facilitator, she was practicing, and I believe she did pass her GED, so that's exciting. This here is also Victor. I like his fun fact that Victor did not want to pay for parking around the library downtown, which is a common complaint around that library because they don't have a parking lot. But then he attended the classes and he was so thrilled with what he was learning that he said it's not a big deal to pay for parking anymore because he loves receiving that help. So we champion Victor. We've also got Edward, who works as a food prep and learned a little bit more English and got some resources through Ask RI, specifically that Mango Languages. We found a lot of people who were familiar with Duolingo, and so a lot of the facilitators started like, oh yeah, Duolingo, that's great. But have you heard of this thing called Mango Languages? It's free. And so we turned a lot of people onto that resource, which was exciting. And then Terry earned a whole bunch of North Star certifications and upped her skills to be able to be better in the workforce, which was part of her goal, which is really exciting. And then our last two here, John is just a frequent library user. He had a smartphone, didn't really know how to use it, was really frustrated. And through working with one of our facilitators, he got in on the Nextdoor app, which he loves to sort of snoop on what's happening in his neighborhood, and to get updated with some music for when he's in downtown, and really appreciated the work that the facilitators did with him. He is a regular, and I think sometimes can be difficult to work with, and so he really appreciated that they took the time to work with him individually. And then Carmen, this is one of the wonderful things about this program is that PPL took people who had participated in past programming that they had done for digital literacy, and some of them became facilitators in the programming. And we really love to see that, because that means that they're approachable. People understand, when you attend something and you don't really know something, it can be really embarrassing to admit that you don't know how to use, these things that everybody else seems to be able to know. And so Carmen was a previous student, now facilitator, and we'll talk a little bit about how investing in your community kind of makes the difference, I think. And so then we have this special video from Linda that she made at one of her sessions. So I'm going to play it for you because I think it's just really heartwarming. And it's here's.
The sound isn't coming through on our
It's
end.
not working. Okay, hold on. Sorry. It's this. Let's see. Share sound. How's that?
Hi, my name is Linda Dewberry, and I entered into Providence Public Library computer class. When I first came here, I didn't know anything about computers. Now, I passed a couple of tests, 97, and the test I took today was 85, and I passed the mouse test. So I'm gonna hang in there and try to do the best that I can do, and I encourage all yous to come that don't know anything about computer. You will love it.
So we thought that was pretty great. We love Linda. Let me get back to, I don't know how to get back to full screen. I'm so sorry. There we go. Okay. All right, so there were a few unexpected opportunities that we took advantage of, which I thought were really important for the success of the program as well. One of those was some of the staff that we hired, or that PPL hired to facilitate programming, even though they were hired for just basic computer skills teaching. We found out that they had like other superstar skills. So some of the people that were already employed by PPL are well-versed in career coaching, and so they were able to do that a lot in the learning lounges specifically. But then one of the specific people had some like deep knowledge of like cybersecurity, and so we made a few extra classes for that sort of higher end learning. He also hosted an intro to G Suite and low code web development, which is specifically like using Wix for setting up like websites and stuff. And I think that it really broadened the services. I think that there's a lot of importance to having, the really basic classes, but that sometimes people sort of know the basics, but they want to know a little bit more, and they want to build some of those skills to be more marketable. And so we were able to plug into that and offer that. It just sort of happened. And the team came to us and they were like, we don't want to waste his services on just basic. And we were like, absolutely, go for it. Like, set those up. So those were really popular. Where they held those, I think they held those in Warwick. And the other one that we did specifically in Warwick, which is why I'm thinking about it, is the Warwick Library here in Rhode Island has a tech person. They do like really great stuff all the time. But they were an area where we had a facilitator who could make it there. And so we reached out and we said, you know, how can we leverage this person's skills and availability with what you're already doing? And so they connected us with a rehab group that was down the street from one of their library branches. And the facilitator ended up doing a resume building workshop with them, with the men of the rehab group. So they met at the library, they used the computers at the library to create resumes in Google Drive or Google Docs. And then taught them how to like take those, access them on their phones because they didn't have computers, they only had phones. So now they could access their resumes that were built and, you know, helped with a career coach, put together on their phones so they could go to like Indeed or some other place to apply for a job and upload it directly with their phones. They didn't need to go back to the library specifically to use a computer. They could do it on the fly and helped them apply for some jobs, which was really exciting. And the last thing that was like super serendipitous, which I think is just the most exciting thing about this and why I'm looking forward to more funding for digital inclusion down the line. So PPL also has a group of people in the library that work specifically with adult education. If you're in the adult education like networks, you may know some of the people who work there. And so there had been a grant going around in the state to get Chromebooks for people who are participating in adult education. That came through at the same time that our digital literacy programming was happening. And people at the library, you know, who were working together noticed that these two things were happening at the same time. And so while we couldn't combine the two grants, right, because it's both federal funding, what we did was sort of like happen to have digital literacy programming in convenient locations near those places where these Chromebooks were being distributed. And so we have like a Dorcas International in Providence that helps resettle refugees, and they got a number of Chromebooks through this grant. So we connected with Dorcas and we said, hey, we know that people there are going to be getting these Chromebooks. Well, don't you know, down the street there's a library that's going to be hosting like a Chromebook 101, you know, get to know your Chromebook program, that if your people, you know, need help to learn how to use this new device that they're about to get, they can sign up for this programming. And so we had a whole host of those types of classes throughout the state where people were getting these devices, and really served a need that way that I think if we didn't have a team that was working with other people who were also working in this realm, we might have missed that opportunity, but it was really exciting to be able to plug into that. And that leads really well into my final pieces of the keys to success. So I think the things that made this program the most successful were working in those collaborations, those partnerships, leveraging the things that people were already doing and figuring out ways that we could be doing work alongside them to make what they were doing stronger and to strengthen what we were doing. Those personal connections, those phone calls to connect people if there was a class that they couldn't attend or was that full when they signed up at their library. They went through a screening process with somebody from the team and were connected to somewhere that would fill the need. So we made sure that classes stayed pretty small. I think the biggest class was 12 people, but that people were able to find help where they needed it. Investing in the community, like we saw with Carmen, taking these people who had been through this programming before and making them facilitators, really investing in their skills, and the flexibility, being able to pivot when things changed for the worse, but also for the better with those Chromebooks, really being able to say, here's an opportunity and how can we leverage it? And so now the only thing that we really need is more money. Obviously, ARPA money ran out. We weren't able to continue funding it, but I'm really hopeful with digital inclusion happening down the line that we'll be able to have a seat at that table, get some of that money, and to continue this work because it's been really powerful. And we would really like to see it keep going. The staff at PPL really wanted to see it keep going, and all of the libraries that we partnered with kept saying like, oh, when's the next round of classes that we can schedule? And unfortunately at this point we're not offering them, but we really hope to again in the future. So ideally, I mean, going into this, we really hoped that it would be sort of a sustainable, ongoing process. So I think that is something that we'll be working towards potentially in the future, having something that is sustainable and statewide. And that is all that I have. I'm happy to take any questions that have come up. I've put here a link to the website at PPL. So because they were services that they were already doing that we invested in creating statewide, they're still ongoing. So if you go to that bit.ly link, you'll be able to see like a piece of what was offered. It's sort of like the bare bones. In the height of the program, there were like 12 different libraries that you could get connected with for services and meet a lot more of the facilitators, but you'll see a handful of the facilitators there and the work that they're doing if you're interested in sort of seeing a little bit more. Let me stop sharing.
Thank you so much. I don't think we missed any I don't think you missed any questions.
Great.
Just a lot of people saying wonderful, and a lot of people love the video and the connections that you made, you know, to make this project happen. One thing I'm curious about, and please everyone put in your questions, or when I'm done, you can unmute yourselves and start asking away. But I'm wondering about your data collection. Like you showed the success stories and you showed, you know, your percentages of people who were more likely to use library resources and things like that. So I was wondering when it was that you surveyed people, or like what your process was for data collection, and then how often that was, or you know, how in depth you went with the information you gathered from the people participating.
Yeah, so I want to give all of the credit to the PPL staff because they did all of that collection. Most of it happened towards the end, although I think that they were probably collecting some information at the beginning of classes to see where people were at, and then again at the end of classes to make that measurable gains leap. So I should say their final report is 26 pages long, and we gave them the LSTA questions to ask so that we could report it out nicely, and they did that. But they also asked people a bunch of other questions. In their intake, they asked a lot of demographic questions, where people were from, race, and things like that. And so I received this, oh, let me unblur my background. I received this lovely report, which also has just oh, that's not it. Every single statement that anybody made to answer a question, they had people at the end calling each of the participants and saying, you know, how they asked them all of the questions, and they did it in English or Spanish or Portuguese, whatever language they spoke. They asked all of these questions to get this feedback. Only about 200 people responded to the surveys by the end, but they collected just so much more data than like any of our other libraries tend to collect. And even like when we do programming, you know, the LSTA questions are more than enough usually for us. But this is like the LSTA questions that they gave us. And so they really, they went like above and beyond to give us all of that data. And so if there's like a specific thing that you're looking for how they collected it, I may be able to ask, but they just all along were just keeping really good records of stuff.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, the intake form is, you know, one way to collect, and then the fact that they were making phone calls and following up, like to only have 200 is amazing. That's really impressive.
Yeah, joyous.
So first off, amazing. It sounds like it just keeps coming up over and over again. There's no substitute for personalized attention. You just can't substitute personalized attention ever. But given that took so much from the library staff, it sounds like you made an amazing impact. Are there any plans to follow up in a year, or is there any way to keep tabs to understand the impact down the line?
Like on individuals?
Yeah.
That's a really great question. I don't think so. But I wonder if that's something to think about for doing this again in the future or like in any other programming. I mean, I'm sure they have the contact information for those people, so theoretically they could, but it wasn't part of that, and people weren't really like, they didn't agree to be called in a year to see where they're at. But that is interesting, and that would be really great data to collect. That would be a really cool story to have. And you mentioned like it took a lot from the staff, and first of all, like the people who were leading this like charge were some of the most incredible people I've ever worked with. But to that end, like there was one person whose like full-time job was implementing this program, and they made most of the phone calls. And then hiring the specific facilitators. I think that was probably also one of the keys to success, right? Having people whose full job it was just focusing on this rather than trying to wear 5,000 hats. And that's the problem with like all the rest of the libraries in Rhode Island, right? You've got a technology librarian, sure, but they're also they're also referenced. They're also like half the time in children's because you just need coverage. A lot of our libraries are short staffed right now. And so they just were feeling like the pressure of capacity, and they weren't able to offer as a robust set of programming as they would like to. And so that's where this sort of bridged the gap. And that's why I think it's like so incredible and so important.
Yeah, I agree. It's having the person that's their full-time job, or that is the only responsibility that they have. It creates a different level of service. It doesn't feel rushed because they have the time that they can devote. So it seems like the feedback that we've heard is we need people, we need the manpower.
And I feel that's an area where those of us who work in state libraries and have, the funding, the ARPA funding's dried up, but we still have LSTA funding and other, ways to help with grants for libraries that want to continue success or be able to demonstrate so much success that it becomes part of an obvious thing that the library should be able to fund in an ongoing basis. So I really think that if we hear more about these success stories, the more we hear about successful programs, the better, because I think that will incentivize the state libraries to really, seek out these programs and help with that funding piece, because I do think that's a key. We've got to help the libraries build staffing capacity for this program.
Absolutely. And I think having these stories, right, for us is so powerful to then go to the powers that be, right? To say, look at how great this is. Look at the impact that it's having. How can we get more money to put towards this? And that's where, I think really this digital inclusion piece that's coming has me really excited, because now we have this to say, look what we could be doing with this, and look how important that is. It's not just giving people devices, it's not just giving people internet access. Those are great and those are important, but even if they have those things, unless you have the skills, what do you do with those things, right? They just sort of collect dust if you don't know how to use them. And so we need to be doing that third piece as well. And that's where libraries can really be doing the work.
Any other questions or comments?
There were no volunteers. Everybody who was in on the program was paid through these funds. That was an idea. So one of the things I forgot to put in here actually was it was a little bit rushed, and then people got COVID, and so it was difficult. We wanted to do a piece where we sort of trained other librarians on the methodology that was used specifically in these classrooms. So the people who were implementing this program have an adult education background, which I think libraries lack, and is so important for structuring classes. So even if a library is offering, you know, a digital literacy class, like how to use email, I think they're just sort of like approaching it ad hoc, like, I know how to use email, let me teach you how to use email, but they're not structuring it like a classroom does with like learning objectives and everything. And so that was one of the things that we wanted to sort of impart on other people from this program to keep it going was, one, you know, if there are volunteers in your community who are interested in doing this type of work, how can you leverage that, get them involved, get them on this training, and then also doing a training of, you know, that teacher style adult education approach to digital literacy. It didn't bite as much as we wanted it to, those trainings. We're finding people sort of, I don't know, traininged out in our state. They're just not coming, or they just don't have the time to come. So that piece definitely happened at the end. Didn't feel as intentional, as impactful as we had hoped that it would. But we would like to see, I mean, some libraries in our state with unions and things like that can't bring volunteers to do this type of work because it would be paid work otherwise. But I think it's an opportunity to work with volunteers, or even just like other community organizations, and say, here's how you can be supporting people.
Do you feel like through this program you're set up well so that if other funds come through, you can pick up again? Like, do you feel like you have something that can be a model, or like, you know, you have more of an infrastructure built, or do you feel like you would have to start from zero and rebuild the program if funds came through?
That's a good question. I don't think that we'd have to start at 0, but we might have to start at like 50 or 60 and to build back. I think that, and it also depends, right? Like who we have to implement it. I believe in the record keeping that they all did along the way, that they could probably pass it along. But the sort of like commitment of the people who first started working on it was important too, and those sort of personalities. And so I think it would take a little bit of finding itself again, but it wouldn't take as long to find itself as it did the first time around, for sure.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's kind of a shame of the timing of the ARPA funds, is that we have this gap where, you know, there might be stuff coming, but there wasn't really a bridge. So it's kind of like trying to tread water so that, like you said, you're not starting at 0, but you know, you pick back up. Well, I don't want to keep everyone, especially since this time of the day can get meeting heavy. I don't know about the rest of you. You know, Emily, if you don't mind putting your email address or your contact information up again, and we can certainly reach out if we have any other questions. And thank you again so much for your time and presenting this great program with us. And especially I loved hearing the success stories and how that information was captured, because that's, I don't know about anyone else from state library agencies, but like, I feel like I'm so far removed sometimes from the actual things that are happening that I forget how this work really impacts people. So that's like my motivation to keep going, like when I get to hear those.
That was definitely my favorite part of those meetings, was like, who are we hearing about today?
Yeah, and that video, oh, such a good idea to capture that. Okay, so I think that's everything. I'll see you all next month. I will be sending out a follow-up email to the list tomorrow that will have the recording uploaded, the link to YouTube with the recording. I'll also grab the chat and any links that were shared, and I'll put them in that email. And there will also be the description of what Lara will be discussing at next month's meeting. And the other thing that'll come through is the updated Outlook invitation that will have Lara's description and the dates for the other meetings up through June. Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention before you guys leave is if anyone is going to LibLearnX and you'd like to plug something that you're doing, now is your chance. But since Natalie's not here, I want to make sure that I call out Career Navigators in Libraries, a person-centered emerging service model. That is on Saturday, January 28th from 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. So if you're going to be there, please think about attending that session. And does anyone else have something they'd like to plug that they're presenting or will be attending at LibLearn?
Libraries Build Business has a session. Yeah, so Diane Lucy from the Richland Library and Brandon West from the Independence Public Library in Kansas will be facilitating a workshop. So it's a 75-minute working group where people will have, I'm trying to pull up the, I'll send it to you, Andrea, and you can send it out with everything. But it's meant to be more hands-on and interactive. It should be a lot of fun. So if you're at LibLearnX, that's on Saturday as well, I think at 10 a.m.
Okay, great. And if anyone else has something to share, you can make use of the listserv, or you can send things to me and I'll make sure that they go out as well. All right. Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and have a great rest of your week.